My name is Jimmy Lee. I'll be the host for you today. I'll be the voice for you today. As you've got questions, we will ask our illustrious panel here. So go ahead and type those questions into the Q&A box, because joining me today is Mr. David Boyd. David is the CEO and founder of Inbound Communication. David, how you doing, brother?
Real well, Jimmy. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me here.
Well, good to see you. How's the airplane?
Oh, fantastic. This is beautiful flying weather in Minnesota. So this is a great time of year to come up and visit and do the fall color tour. And I'll be happy to host you up here.
What? Just come on down, pick me up, and we'll just go flying right back up.
Let's
Because
go.
down here in St. George, Utah, the colors are flying as well. The oranges, the yellows, the reds, they're amazing. And
Can't
if you're
help but be happy this
colorblind,
time of the year, Jimmy.
it all
Yeah,
looks the same. It just looks like trees that are going naked. So come
great.
on down, pick me up. Let's go. Let's go check out the colors. That'll be fun.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Good to
Joining
see
as
you, Jimmy.
well, our voice today, our coach with the most, Mr. Aaron Woods, coach, CEO, owner of Extra Mile Auto Repair. Aaron, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Jimmy. It's good to see you guys. David, good to see you as well. And I'm looking forward to sharing all kinds of great tips and tricks today for all of our listeners and viewers.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. Because we've got some great discussion that we're going to talk about here today as we talk about you, Aaron, and you're getting into the industry, you getting into the business. How in the world did you get started in the automotive repair business?
It's a long journey. I've actually been in the automotive industry in one facet or another since my high school days, but I've always kind of had a little bit of that entrepreneurial, itch is what they like to say. And so I've always wanted to start my own business and form my own company, and automotive repair is what I knew. And when I came out of becoming a full-time musician, I decided to go ahead and start my own auto repair shop as the only employee. And so Extra Mile Auto Care was born as me being the technician and the service advisor back in 2018.
Oh my gosh. So you seriously went from strumming a guitar to turning a wrench?
Yes. Yes, I oftentimes tell the story that I was playing with Joe Nichols on Saturday night, opening up for him, old 90s country guy, and then changing a valve cover on an Audi on Monday morning.
Oh my word. So was that it? I mean, was that the point? You were with Joe Nichols, and the next thing you know, you're changing out head gaskets?
Lots of questions to be answered. Yes, I started Extra Mile Auto Care on the journey in end of October of 2018. So almost to the day, 5 years ago, or no, 6 years ago now. It's been an incredible journey.
Dang, that's amazing. That is super cool. And what do you think of the change, the transition? I mean, you got out of music, you're now in automotive. Love it, hate it,
Oh, I
like
wouldn't
it?
change it. Wouldn't change it for the world. I've
Wouldn't change.
always been passionate about the automotive industry, and I really entered it for the first time in high school in 2003, and I've been in it outside of the 5 years for most of my life. I think it's a great industry with a bright future, and I just look forward to always continuing to grow it and being like a guiding light in that beacon.
Oh yeah, for sure. And a guiding light is right. I mean, your shop, you were at the back end of the backside of the back shop. You had two bays, right? When you first started, and you were,
One.
oh, you had one
Yeah,
bay.
one bay in the back of a back of a shop in an alley. So we've gone from that to our current location where we are now. So it's been a definitely a journey for sure.
Well, and what does that journey look like? How do you go from one base to owning a shop? And I don't even know how many bays you have now.
What does the journey look like?
Yeah. How do you go the one
Saturdays,
bay?
Sundays. I
Yeah.
would say it's a journey that I wouldn't change for the world. I think that it's a lot about growing. It's a lot about developing yourself and building a team around you that, they always say, go find people that are better than you. And I truly believe in that. And ultimately joining in with the coaching, now I'm with the Institute, but I remember when my journey first started, I was a shop owner that received coaching from the Institute. And I would not be here where I am today without that coaching. So I think knowing where your strengths are and then seeking help and guidance in those weaknesses to help improve in those areas to get you where you need to go.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So and for a long time it was you, a bucket, and your wrench and the single bay. At what point did you take the leap to go to the next stage? And was that 2 bays or did you go
So
to
yeah,
4 bays? What did you
so
go
we
to?
went from 1 bay to 3 bays, and we did that about 6 months after we had started. And then we were there for about a year and a half. I'd hired a couple of employees, and we'd outgrown that location, and so we moved to our existing location now, which is 6 bays. And then we're actually getting ready this Friday to be closing on our second location. So now we're taking the step into the multi-shop ownership.
Congratulations.
It's really
Thank you.
exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is super exciting. Okay, so our conversation here today is centered around coaching and training. We talk about professional athletes. They all have two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 different coaches. Michael Phelps, as a swimmer, had a dive coach, a stroke coach. For each stroke that he did in the water, he had a different coach. They had flip turn coaches. Here you are with an automotive business, automotive shop. You have to have a coach. This is somebody who gives you that
Mhm.
outside insight, insight
It
into your
works.
business. And Aaron, you went from being coached to becoming a coach. What did that look like for you?
Well, I think I've always had, again, going back to what we talked about a little bit ago, having a passion for the industry.
Yeah,
And I think ultimately, whichever part of this industry, and David, you can speak for this, and Jimmy, you can speak for this as well. Whatever role we fill in this industry, I think it starts with you have to love it and you have to have a passion for it. And I think where mine came from is seeing the success that can be had, when you devote yourself to this industry, and seeing that the power of the transformation of seeing folks turn from having a job, is what we like to call it, to owning a business.
yeah,
And again, I think it it having a passion for seeing the industry grow, to seeing the industry improve, for helping others achieve their goals and their dreams in this industry, is something that I've always had a passion for doing. And when I had the opportunity to give back to an industry that you do love and have a passion for, I absolutely jumped at that opportunity. I'll oftentimes say, no matter who's out there, um, I think that you should always be an internal student. And what I love so
mm,
much about the continuing coaching and group facilitation is that I get the opportunity to learn just as much about this industry as that I give back. And so I think it's an ultimate opportunity to learn more than you teach in an industry that I love.
that's awesome. That's awesome. You know, the teacher learns as much as the student. Isn't that one of the phrases?
Absolutely.
Because as a teacher, you've got to super prepare and super be on top of your game to be able to come and engage students and elevate them to the level of your study. Yeah,
I agree.
that's cool. Okay, so talking about specifically getting into coaching and coaching phone calls. This is part of what you do as a shop owner. It's part of what you do as a coach in the industry.
Mhm.
It's part of what you do as a facilitator with the shops that are in your different groups. Part of what you do in the manager performance group. Is that right? That
Mhm.
you're coaching these phone calls. What are some of the common challenges you see that shops have when it comes to those inbound phone calls to their shop?
I would have to say, I think one of the common challenges that I run into is that a lot of shop owners, I don't feel like, place enough emphasis on when the sales call truly starts. And I'll go back and elaborate a little bit on that.
Okay.
When the sales call starts is the first time that a customer calls your business. How your service advisors answer the phone, how are they being greeted, how are the expectations being laid out for a new customer. We oftentimes call that the setting the expectations for the new customers that come in. And so much of that starts at that initial phone call coming into your shop. How do your service advisors handle that? And I think with that being said, a lot of shop owners that I work with, they feel like, well, when the sales aren't where that needs to be, or the conversion rates aren't where they need to be, or we have a service advisor that's underperforming, they want to go straight to the sales call. And it's like, truly, there's so much more that happens before that. I taught a class on trust, and I'm a firm believer in that trust is the number one driver of a decision when a customer makes to be able to invest in their vehicle or to not invest in their vehicle. They might say that it's price, or they might tell you that it's availability, but a lot of it comes down to trust. And at the beginning of an interaction with a customer, I like to use a metaphorical trust bucket, right? So we have this trust bucket. And everything that we do, every interaction we have with a customer either adds into that trust bucket or pokes a hole in the bottom of that trust bucket. And at the end of the interaction, how much trust is in our trust bucket can sway dramatically how a customer chooses to invest in their vehicle. And I think that so much of that building that trust is foundational from the first time that customer calls. And I think what we're going to talk about even more so today is how do our advisors master that communication using great phone systems?
Well, yeah, we'll definitely get into the phone systems. Let's talk first about the service advisors.
Mhm.
And how do you help that service advisor to take control of the conversation? Do you help set up that bucket of trust that they are in control of the conversation from the very beginning rather than allowing the customer to drive the conversation? How do you help a service advisor to drive more appointments into the shop?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of it starts with just phone etiquette training and
Hmm.
giving that service advisor the tools that they need. When we think about a shop and we think about tools, we think of technicians often, right? Where a technician wheels in this big, gigantic toolbox, and it's nice and it's shiny, and they can open up all the drawers and they can get exactly the right tool that that technician needs to perform that job. Well, we have to also think of that for our advisors as well. And what tools do they need to be able to do their job at a high level? Similar to, our technicians that are fixing cars. Well, our service advisors are fixing people. So having the right training to be able to know how to talk to a customer, the right etiquette, the right verbal communication skills. I think whether it be having good incoming call scripts, I think creating that consistency across the board with customers, being able to call your shop and giving your advisor those first, 4 to 5 scripted things to start a conversation off on the right path, then helps lead that customer down that. But I think ultimately it comes with the tools being the scripts, being the training for these service advisors, the relationship building aspect of it, as well as some of the software and the tools that they use on the physical side of it as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's powerful to be able to give them the right scripts, to have that experience with the customer, that it's consistent and it
Absolutely.
happens the same way every single time. So one of the tools you talk about, this toolbox that technicians have in their base, and it's so true. One of the tools that we equip the service advisor with is to not give price over the phone. And my question for you is why? Why do we do that? Why do we not give pricing over the phone?
I think oftentimes, well, there's a multitude of different reasons. I had a trainer tell me a long time ago that once price is given, there's no more value can be added. And so
Okay.
oftentimes I find that when we arrive at giving a price, we haven't truly asked enough questions yet to really get to the bottom of what the customer is needing. And I think that is where I see 90% of these calls go sideways, is that it's not so much that we gave a price that is the concern. It's that we haven't done our job enough before that price needs to happen. Now, yes, with that being said, I'm not a huge advocate of giving a price over the phone in general. However, let's go back and let's talk about the steps that lead up to giving the price. Have we
Hmm.
properly vetted that customer? You know, oftentimes a customer, when they first call our shops, they may be leading with a price leading question only because they don't know what else to ask.
Yeah.
And so having our advisors properly vet a customer in that instance to get to the bottom of, how much for a cooling system service? Well, that's a great question. What has us needing to believe that we need a cooling system service? And then going through those vetting questions, well, they might find out that the customer is really has a coolant leak that they need to be inspected and repaired. And so if we just jump straight to the give a price, at that point we become an order taker.
Mm.
And I like to think of our industry professionals as more consultants and advisors in that help first mentality. And how a better way can we help each customer that calls than to ask the questions to help lead them down the path that we need to go?
Oh, so true. My brother once bought a Ford Explorer from my uncle, and he got the car and he drove it for about a week and noticed that there was a shimmy, there was a shake happening as he was driving down the road. And he took it into the shop and he says, "I want all new shocks and struts all the way around. Give me new shocks and struts." So they did. If they would have asked one question,
Hmm.
he could have avoided buying all new shocks and struts. But he didn't. They did not ask that question. They just did what he asked. He went and picked up the car later that afternoon, drove it around the block, pulled right back into the parking lot and said, "You didn't fix my car." They said, "We fix your shocks and struts." "Yeah, but there's this shimmy and shake that happens when I drive down the road." "Oh, sounds like you might need some new tires. Let's go and inspect your tires." Sure enough, he had a bubble on the tire. So now he had to have a full new set of tires.
Absolutely. I think ultimately it comes down to a little bit of a touch of psychology, in my opinion.
Yes.
I oftentimes, when I'm talking with service advisors or working with managers in the program, or really even owners as well, I think a lot of it starts with an understanding that people truly don't buy parts.
Yeah.
Nobody comes into our shop wanting to buy a battery or wanting to buy tires or wanting to buy brake pads. What it is that people buy feelings, right? We're truly buying emotions. And whether that be an emotion of that sense of, freedom, that when my car is repaired correctly, I can get in it and go drive on vacation, whether it be a sense of accomplishment that I feel that I can get in my car and I can start it and trust that it will start and get me to where I need to go. Those are the things that our customers are truly buying from us. And I think if we don't take the time and on that discovery call, whether it be setting the expectations, asking enough questions, truly getting to know the customer, then are we really capitalizing on the fact that our customers are coming to us to buy those feelings or those emotions? And so I think it comes back to a little bit of psychology of understanding why are people coming to us, and then how do we capitalize on that?
Yeah, it's very true. David, I don't know when's the last time you had a couple extra $1,000 or $2,000, went to your shop and said, "Hey, I want a new timing belt and throw in a water pump while you're at it."
It's important. I'm a customer. I'm not a technician by training, so my background's in process engineering. I don't know what's wrong with my car, so I have a unique perspective of being the customer and experiencing what the customer experiences when I interact with the shop. So I'm well versed in good call handling versus poor call handling. So it grates me if I call and talk to a service advisor that begins diagnosing something over the phone. I almost prefer just being like, "Here's the keys, go drive it, experience what I experience," instead of me prescribing that, because I am not the trained expert. So I think it's important for service advisors to at least mentally or emotionally at times shift that role and put themselves in the customer's shoes, right? So what does the customer experience, so that we're not playing the guessing game, and the customer doesn't have to be the expert. The customer doesn't need to be the one saying, "This is what I need fixed," because I know the shop that I prefer going to has an ASE certified technician who will look over the car, the whole car, no matter what my complaint is, And then they'll come back to me and say, we found this and this and this. And I'm like, that's great. Take care of it all, or let's come up with a plan.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever secret shopped another shop, Aaron?
Oh yeah.
Have you gone in with your car, not even telling them that you're a tech or that you're a shop owner, and just to experience their customer journey?
Last week.
Okay, tell us about it. What'd you do?
Yeah, I had a shop that I needed a tire repaired, and of course I actually live in the state of Kansas. My shop is in the state of Oklahoma, and so yes, I have all the equipment and can do all of those things, but I needed a tire repaired on my Honda, and there's a shop a couple miles down the road, and so I called and scheduled an appointment and took my Honda down there and got an oil change and my tire repaired. So it was a little strange to experience it from that side. Just they did a phenomenal job, don't get me wrong, but just being on that side of things, it not only was it strange, but my manager and I were having a discussion yesterday, and this was something that I feel like is important. He had a an appointment for some recall work to be done on his wife's Toyota they had just bought, and he had
Oh,
scheduled appointment with the dealer, and he's had no negative interactions with this dealer, and so I want to preface with that. But he was talking to me about how important communication is and promise times and and all of that, and how sometimes the anxiety can build just leading up to the appointment with not knowing what to expect. And he was, he's like, it was crazy to think we deal with this all day long as professionals within the industry because I'm a customer taking my car to this place to get this recall done. And I've had no, pre-leading indicators that would say anything is going to go wrong with this interaction, but just not knowing what the expectations are led to some anxiety on his behalf. And I think that's a very real thing that, David, maybe you could chime in on that, being more on that customer side. Is that real?
It is, yeah. So there is a good experience and then a poor experience. The unknown, I think as consumers, really anything that we do as a consumer, if I don't know what to expect, I think the fear begins to set in, right? So we fear the unknown, we fear at some level, consciously or subconsciously, how is this going to go? And ultimately, how is this going to impact my wallet? So if I'm taking my vehicle in, for example, and I don't have any concept of how this is going to happen, what do I do when I get there? Who do I talk with? How do I get my vehicle to you? I like my car, and it's a valuable asset. So there's that part of it as well. So the more that we know about the experience, and the more that the service advisor shares when we have that customer interaction, I've been on the receiving end of that. I can tell you it feels a lot better. The other part of this is after hours. So we're not always at the shop. So what are we doing after hours? Maybe I have a breakdown and I need to get my vehicle somewhere. So when I call the shop and it's 9 o'clock at night, I'm not really expecting somebody to answer the phone. But when the shop is giving me the instructions on how to get my vehicle there, how to get connected with the tow service, what to do when the vehicle arrives, I feel a lot better. And then establishing that expectation is paramount. So whether it's during business hours and I'm talking with the service advisor, or after and I'm receiving some additional information, what's the expectation? When am I going to hear back? What am I going to hear back? When I bring my car to you, what are you guys going to do with it? So now we take 30 or 45 seconds and just lay all of this expectation out. I feel super confident about coming in, and now I trust you. You were talking about that trust bucket, right? So I trust you because it's not just hey, drop off your car with your blank check and we'll let you know what we're going to fill in there, right? So I mean, it's a little facetious, but that I think is partly as a consumer what goes through somebody's mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Oh,
I that's been my biggest concern with going to any shops, and I've done a little bit of secret shopping here most recently, just to discover that the shop that I go to, it's like I have to do all the heavy lifting. And why? Why the heavy lifting? Because that phone must weigh 100 pounds or 100 tons to get them to pick it up and call or to text or anything, communication. I, as a consumer, need communication. I need to know what's going on with my car. It's in your shop. To your point, David and Aaron, both of you, the anxiety that you have as you're taking your car. I just want to know what's going on.
No, I couldn't agree anymore, and that's a great point, David, is you know, we almost have to over communicate in what we
Yes.
do and to set those expectations. And I think fear lives and breeds in those areas when we don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And when the fear starts to set in or that anxiety starts to set in, that's like taking you know, a big you know, rock and just smashing a hole right in the bottom of your trust bucket, because
That's a bazooka hole.
you can do all of those things. You know, you can fix the car well, you can do all of these things the correct way, but still lose the interaction with the customer simply for the fact of communication. So I
Yeah.
think every shop should have just a set of principle, you know, procedures, processes, a list of here are the expectations that we lay out with customers. When that phone rings, this is how we answer it. This is the communication that we need to set in. You know, many shops even, I know this is more on the phone side of it, but just in general with communication, there's so much canned messages that we can send out to a customer of, you know, setting those expectations.
Oh, I think Aaron may have froze.
I still get you.
Yeah, I'm still on as well. So,
Okay.
what's interesting here, and I hope that Aaron comes back. Aaron, I think you just moved.
I'm back.
Hey!
I
I
see
don't
him.
know
I
what
see him.
happened.
So I totally agree with you. Process procedures with the when the car's in and you've got to follow up with the client, with the customer. I want to dial this back a little bit back to the very beginning where we have the second opportunity of making that first impression and we're answering the phone. We're on with the caller, we're answering the phone. First impression would be your website. People are looking you up. They know who you are. They have researched you. This is your second opportunity to make a first impression when you're picking up the phone call. Now, what do you do, Aaron or David? What have you seen with those clients that insist on getting a price over the phone? What's the best way of being able to handle a situation like that with a client?
Go ahead, David.
Sure. So I've seen it work well. The flow of understanding what the customer wants to accomplish is super important. So there are times when it's okay to quote what I would call canned jobs. We call those different things in the industry, but where we'll talk about a price, and it's important not to diagnose. Let me preface all of this by saying I believe I'm a process guy, so I listen to a lot of the process of communication and interaction. I believe it's paramount that we don't diagnose over the phone. It is based only on what a customer is telling us, and service advisors, particularly those who have a history as technicians, really find it hard to break that mold. So we want to be careful not to diagnose over the phone because that can make this like confusion bubble become super huge, and we don't want to again crush people under this fear of what's this going to cost me. But understanding, okay, well, I need a new engine. We have a number of factors. What makes you feel like you need a new engine, and there we have to really get into it, inspect the vehicle, and then ultimately, if you have that, in order for somebody to commit to making that appointment and come in, that's ultimately what our goal is to have them schedule that appointment, come and see us. We'll have our ASE certified technician inspect this vehicle. We may look at a range. Owners look at this differently. So for that type of service, it may fall in this to this. Ultimately, we're not going to know until we get our eyes on the vehicle. We have our ASE certified technician do a full comprehensive inspection. We'll give you a report and we will walk you through what's wrong with that. So Aaron, what's your take on ultimately coming down to a price if you need to?
Well, I agree with you. We certainly don't want to be diagnosing anything over the phone. I think when it comes to the pricing side of things, ultimately, we can land there on a very limited type of basis. I think when all the other bases are covered,
Hmm.
we've listened to the customer, we've we haven't diagnosed, but we've listened to the symptoms of the vehicle, and we have built that and established that trust with the customer. There are a few lines that I've used over the years that seem to go over really well. And I'll touch on one or two of those, and then I'll finish my statement here. One is, I value this relationship, and so therefore I don't want to destroy our trust by giving you a price for something that you may or you may not need. And a lot of times, just taking that stance of why it is, so many shops will say, well, we don't give prices over the phone. That's not helpful to me as a consumer. To me, the only thing I'm hearing at that point is that's about you. That's not about me.
Yeah.
I hear shops say, well, our insurance won't allow us to do this, or we don't give prices over the phone, or our policy
It's our
says
policy.
this.
Yeah, I hear that a
Yes,
lot.
that drives me bonkers when I hear
Yeah.
somebody say that, our policy is this. Well, that's your policy. That doesn't
Yeah.
help me. So I think 90% of interactions that I hear that a customer is insisting on a price is that we have not done our job in making it about why we shouldn't do that to the customer. What is the benefit to them, or what could potentially not be a benefit to them by giving the price over the phone, right? And of course, David had touched on it with the, selling the inspection and asking the questions and things of that matter. But I think ultimately, really what it comes down to is the biggest way that you can act like you care is acting like you care, or is caring, right?
No
I know,
way.
right? And it's like, so if we truly have the best interest of the customer in mind,
Yeah.
it is to want to be the Sherpa in this interaction and to want to establish the trust and to not do anything to destroy that. And I think when we convey it to a customer why it's in their best interest for me to not just quote a job blindly and send that to them, that
Yeah.
why it is in their best interest for us to inspect that vehicle, I think 90% of the times those can be avoided. Now, to touch back on well, what if it just arrives at the point where a customer says, okay, I've heard you on that. You've told me all the things reasons why you shouldn't give me a price, all of those things. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm just looking for a price. At that point, I would just ask the customer, what, why is that so important to you?
Mm.
Well, I'm just calling around looking for the cheapest price. Well, more than likely, that's not the customer that is going to be landing at your doorstep, anyways. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I have respectfully, and I say this the word the right way, respectfully informed customers, yet through the interaction, that it might be best for them to go ahead and call somebody else. If I've asked the right questions and we've deemed at the end of the day that's what they're calling about, is you're the fifth shop that they've called and they're really just looking for the cheapest price, creating an estimate isn't probably going to get you there anyways.
No, no, it's really not. And I remember back in the day working with call tracking phone numbers, call coaching. We would download tons of phone calls and listen to tons of phone calls, trying to find the right phone call to be able to coach and train service advisors, customer service, sales skills. Trying to find that perfect call can be a challenge. What are you doing these days that makes it quicker and easier for you, Aaron, as a shop owner, David, for you as a service provider? What are you doing that helps you get to those calls quicker to find the coachable call as well as the champion call? Because if you can show somebody the champion calls, maybe they can't create it in their own mind, but if they hear it, now they can duplicate it.
Well, so it starts with consistency and training. And what you just said, Jimmy, is super important, I think, for the listener of this to understand is the number one reason that I see owners don't review calls and coach and train with real calls is the heavy lift of time.
Yeah.
Bottom line, it's very
Yeah.
time consuming, and then
Can
it's
be.
tedious, right? And then we might do it once, and like we set this plan of we're going to do this every other week or every week or however frequently. The next time I go to do it, I'm like, oh, it's going to take a half hour, 45 minutes or an hour to do that. So I don't have time to do that right now. And then all of a sudden 3 months has passed. So we
Yeah.
lose the consistency of the review process, having a way to, be effective in maintaining that consistent interaction initially to overcome the hurdles of this call review and training process, right? And then being able to demonstrate for the advisor what is the expectation and listen to good calls and maybe not so good calls, but what is that call flow, right? What's my expectation? Sometimes we call it script, sometimes we call it a call flow, but what is the expectation of how do we handle that? And then also like what's the emotional perspective of the service advisor when they're handling calls? Are they flustered? Does that come through on the phone? You know, the morning calls and the afternoon calls sometimes are handled differently. So that I keep coming back to the consistency. I'll let Aaron
Mm.
talk to kind of the execution side of it, but making sure that it's definitely a best practice. We know without a doubt that going through real calls, sitting down with the advisor, reviewing them is highly valuable. And I would further suggest that doing that consistently is super important because then also the service advisor is thinking, is this the call that
Yeah.
we're going to be listening to tomorrow morning? Right.
Yeah. That
Uh,
consistency is paramount. If you're not doing this on a consistent basis, it's not a company meeting, it's a company beating.
Beating. Yeah, it really is. And it's,
Yeah.
3 months or 6 months pass, and now it becomes a
S-
painful process. Nobody wants to
Totally.
participate in it. And there is something on the very front end that I'll come back to or just mention here again briefly is this initial there's some acclimation that has to happen in order to, as me as a service advisor, to listen to myself on a recording. I sound different on a recording.
Totally.
I might, I might not be able to get over that for, one or two or three different sessions listening to myself. So this is important. And I think owners need to understand that doing this up front and just being okay, like, hey, let's listen to a call. Let's just listen to a call and see how this goes. Let's listen to this together. If you have some thoughts on it, great. Give me your thoughts on it. And then we're going to move into a structured coaching process around this training and development plan.
no, I 100% agree. I think David, hit the nail on the head there. I think it becomes such a time consuming process. I was actually on a call this morning with a shop owner who said he used to carve out Thursday afternoons from 1 to 4 to listen to calls, and he couldn't do it. It was too time consuming. He had too much going on, and so that it didn't get done.
Yeah.
One thing that David talked about, and I love that you had mentioned it. It's about setting the tone of the interaction. It's
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a negative thing. Like there are a lot of things that when we sit down to listen to calls that we celebrate, right? Like not every call that you listen to is about picking out all of the negative things. I think it's also about pointing out the positive things as well and reinforcing those because those are just as important. But ultimately, we've believed in call coaching for since we have essentially been in business, and I think that making the time to do it, improving upon ourselves, improving upon our processes is, I think, as painful as it is. I remember in 2007 when I started as an advisor, I used to have to go up in my fixed ops manager's office and listen to calls. And it was so painful at the beginning, but like anything else, you learn, you get better, you hear the positive things that you're doing, you hear the coachable moments. And I think that's what's important, right? It's about building our self-esteem and our confidence, using our advisor's best tool, the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Aaron, do you want to share your screen and talk
Yeah.
about?
Absolutely.
programs of what you're using and how you're doing that?
Yeah, so we've been with Call Inbound for a couple of years now, and one of the things that David has recently came out with that I have loved, and thank you again, David, for saving hours and hours of our time, is David's AI phone system. Essentially, what this does is this takes those hours and hours out of our time as shop owners that we can be spending doing more productive things by having this somewhat compile all of that information in an easy to access format for us. Of course, me being an owner, one of the first and most important things that I look at when I do open up this system is over here to the right. I look at the conversion rate. When I talk marketing with shop owners, there's so many times where I hear from shop owners that my shop is slow and I put all this money into marketing. Why isn't my marketing working? And I oftentimes talk about there are two types of conversions in your business. There is a conversion that the customer clicks on from the advertisement or whatever it may be. And then there's the second conversion, which is your service advisor converting the lead into an appointment.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, this is the one analytic that we do not have. And I love, again, that this portal can give me that second conversion rate that we talk about, which is the number of conversions that the customer has made. So over here is the conversion rate. I do also like the overall score indicator that it talks about. We use this a lot in our weekly scorecards that we send out. We'll send this score to our advisors so they can see that. And then also down here, when we look, we have what we call the T and the S, which the T gives us a really good transcript of every call, and then the S gives us a summary. Now you'll see there's a T and an S for two different areas here. Again, thank you so much, David, for putting these into two different categories so that we can jump right to like what we talked about before. It's not all about the negative, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about reinforcing the positive. And I love how they call these the champion conversations. So we love as a team to be able to pull up these positive interactions and celebrate an advisor that had a help first mentality or that followed the process that resulted in a win, right? And then down below, we have what we call the coachable conversations. So this allows us to jump right to the areas that we want to focus on. Let's celebrate the win, and then let's look at some areas that we can improve. So when we want to see like a further information to like the transcript of the summary, we can click right here on this black box, and that's going to take us to this next information. It's kind of a little bit more of a breakdown into it. There's a couple of places on here that I look at as an owner that I like to focus on. One is somebody once told me about the Socratic method when it comes to phone calls. And it says, he who controls the call or asks the questions controls the call. And so we oftentimes want to look at who is controlling the call. Are we order taking or are we the ones driving the process? We oftentimes find that who is talking at a certain percentage of the time is who oftentimes champions those calls. So I do think it's important to understand when we're looking at analytics, who is driving that process. So you can see here when we clicked on that one call that brought it down into a breakdown, we have Nate Skaggs, who is the advisor here, and then we have the caller. So we can actually see a little bit of a breakdown here on the percentage of how much Nate spoke during this conversation and how much the customer spoke during this conversation. I'm not saying that there's a analytic, maybe David, I'm sure he could probably, chime in on this as to what's a good analytic to see. David, what do you oftentimes see there?
Great question. And, what I'd like to see is a 60-40 split at minimum. So typically on an appointment setting call, we're going to be looking at the advisor. I like seeing, I'll point out too, the percentage, of course, but who's talking and when, right?
Yeah.
So it's one indication of the control and ownership of the call. 60% for the service advisor is a good starting point. And then if it gets to be significantly longer, where we're seeing 80% talk time for the service advisor, or
Wow.
maybe worse, 80% talk time for the customer. These are good indicators where we want to have talk coaching around control and the flow of a call.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. So I was always curious of what that, analytic, what you oftentimes see that converts those. But if you look over here to the right, of course, at the end of the day, it's about that conversion rate, right? So what I'm looking for is I want to know, okay, did our boxes get checked?
Mm.
We talked about in our discussion earlier about having a process, right? Setting those expectations, having a process for creating that uniform result. Well, part of that process is getting the customer's name. Are we coming through with that help first mentality? Back to the best way to act like you care is to care, right? That politeness. Did we ask for the appointment? Did we ask for the close of that sale? All of those you can see over here to the right. It kind of hits each box and saying, okay, we got the name, our advisor was polite or checked that box, but then you can see like this call ultimately landed in a coachable, type of setting, or may have ended in a coachable type of setting because ultimately the appointment was not set. And so we can filter different things for these calls down here in these tags, and then look for the analytics over here on the right. Now, again, back to the S and the T that we talked about, the summary and the transcription is, I can see just real fast a summary of this call, what the call was talking about, just any quick points. And then I can also click right here on this transcript, and I can get a breakdown for the conversation as a whole. And so again, this is about being able to pinpoint right to what we're looking for, both the champion calls and the coachable calls, seeing who's controlling those calls, what boxes were checked in our process, and then ultimately get a summary and a transcript of the call. This has been huge for us in seeing kind of where we rate on these areas, what we can celebrate, where we need to coach, and providing our advisors going back to the toolbox, right? This is the toolbox that our advisors need to be successful.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, David, thank you. The
Yes, thank you.
information here, hours of listening to phone calls and trying to get that right phone call for coaching. Hours. The amount of
Super
hours,
important.
Aaron,
Yeah.
that have been saved here. It's just tremendous.
Aaron, let me ask too, you've done the before and after, right?
Mhm.
With tools and not with tools, right? Just listening to calls. So um how do you feel it, and sorry to ask the questions here, Jimmy, I know that's your job, but
No, carry
um
on.
how does it drive consistency? This is what I always keep coming back to, is with call coaching, it really comes down to consistency. It's important to keep doing it. Once we start, we have to keep doing it. How do you feel like it drives your consistency and the others that you work with in the industry?
Yeah, I think that it yeah, I like to think of it as a bowling lane. I know that's kind of a weird analogy, but when you go to play bowling, sometimes they'll put the bumpers, the guardrails over the gutters on the side, right? And it's like, okay, you can throw a bowling ball, and if you get too far this way, it allows you to move back towards the middle, and it kind of navigates you all the way down to the pins. And so I think, to answer your question, what is it about it? I think it provides that path of, okay, here's the analytics that are saying, here's what we're doing well, here's the areas that we can improve. Let's dial right in on those things, and let's see. And it's crazy how our advisors now almost every week like to see that dial indicator move to
Mhm.
the right, right? And we could go into the psychology of the dopamine, and those types of things, but it's like, ultimately, how do we eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And so it's about
Yeah.
focusing on that one small thing that we can change to move that needle, and then that builds confidence. And then when they start building that confidence, success breeds more success.
It's so true. It's so true. It does. It does. That consistency, using this as a consistent tool in the shop is better than the beating in the shop. This is not, you will not have success if you are not consistent with this phone skills process. More consistent you are, the better it's going to be for dang sure. So,
Absolutely.
David, thank you. So, as a last final magic wand moment, Aaron, what's the magic wand you would wave over the industry? Where do you see it going? What would you magic wand be for the automotive industry?
I think that I see us going to where it's funny. I was having this conversation 10 years ago, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. The word service advisor was something that you heard of at very few shops, right? And now it's very few shops that don't have service advisors.
Yeah.
And I think where are we going as a future? Obviously, the technology aside and the, the obstacles there. I think where we're going is I think we're finally, we control our own destiny to step into the professionalism that we want the customers to see us as. And it goes back to, I always think of those old commercials with the old greasy mechanic with the, greasy hands, eating the donut, as you walk in. It's like we control to change that narrative. And I think that as we continue to grow as an industry, we're going to be bringing more of that professionalism in to change that public perception.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we can control the narrative. I appreciate that. David, what's your magic wand moment here for the industry?
Yeah, if I could wave a wand and have every owner understand the value of training, I think it would help it would help the customer experience. Really, that's what it comes down to. But it's important to evaluate like people's own satisfaction, right?
Mhm.
And when a service advisor is working and feeling overwhelmed and they feel the weight of the operation of the shop and so forth, to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about not just what we do, but how we do it. And having the conversation about being teachable. So it for owners, for managers, for advisors, and technicians, I mean, everybody in the shop environment, it's important to have this mentality of um, one, I want to be teachable, but I also want to foster the environment where it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to learn something new every day. And it's okay, if we make mistakes, we're going to learn from that. So fostering this environment is super high on my radar, and helping owners be champions of communication in this environment. It makes a better work environment. It makes a better customer experience.
Oh, it
Love
totally
it.
does. Totally does. Well, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your time, your effort, your energy. There's so many questions that we haven't been able to get to. We promise that we will answer all of your questions. We'll send an email with answers to a lot of these questions. And to Aaron, to your point, and um, David, to yours as well. Coaching and training, that is what we do. We are the Institute. We are here to help the industry as a whole to have a better business, a better life, and a better industry. So that is our focus. That is our effort and our energy where we want to put ourselves. And speaking of coaching and training, coming up here in November in Dallas, Texas, leadership intensive. This is all human centric to the dopamine you were talking about, Aaron, in helping people make decisions. Why do they choose what they choose? Why do they make the decisions that they make? Come to this leadership intensive. This is going to change your mindset and the way you think about customers, consumers, your customers, your clients, even your staff, even your people. This is phenomenal training put on by Michael Smith for the Institute. It's absolutely amazing. Go to wearetheinstitute.com under events, go to leadership intensive, and definitely register for that. It's definitely something you want to be a part of. And coming up here very shortly in February, right around the corner, the summit, the Institute Summit in Amelia Island, Florida, February 6th through the 8th. Also on that same page, wearetheinstitute.com, this is an opportunity for you to come together with other shop owners that are of like mind that want to help increase the business, increase their person, who they are, increase their business, what they do, so that they can have a better life, a better business, and a better industry. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for all you do. You guys are awesome. Let's take this to the next level. Let's lock arms so that together we raise this industry to the next level. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you soon.